Tonight, one of Australia's most celebrated Indigenous leaders, Dr Lowitja O'Donoghue, dies aged 91. A man charged over the alleged murder of a mother and son in Adelaide's northwest. Australia backs another US-led wave of airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. And Sean Abbott blasts a half-century to help Australia set 259 for the West Indies to chase down in Perth. Good evening, Evelyn Leckie with South Australia's ABC News. Australia has lost one of its most celebrated Indigenous leaders, with Dr Lowitja O'Donoghue dying, aged 91. The former Australian of the Year spent her life fighting for the rights of First Nations people, spending decades in senior Aboriginal community leadership positions. Dr O'Donoghue's family has given permission for her name and image to be used.
Even after leaving public life, Lowitja O'Donoghue continued to pass on her knowledge and fight for reconciliation.
We were stolen, but we need to move on.
Born in remote South Australia to an Aboriginal mother and pastoralist father, Dr O'Donoghue and her two elder sisters were taken from her parents when she was 2. She was trained to be a domestic worker.
I feel angry about the policy that removed us and also took away our culture, took away our language and took away our families.
30 years went by before she saw her mother Lily again.
And what I saw was a woman who had been undone.
Dr O'Donoghue put her efforts into improving the health of her people, fighting discrimination to become the first Aboriginal nurse in South Australia. She joined the public service and spent her career advocating for Aboriginal rights and welfare.
My own heart is very heavy. Heavy with the sadness of how little has been achieved.
Leading the now dissolved Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission and campaigning for greater recognition for First Nations people, notably when she became the first Australian Aboriginal person to address the UN General Assembly.
That the Australian Constitution be changed to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the continent's original inhabitants.
Dr O'Donoghue played a key role in negotiations to introduce historic native title legislation and establish the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples.
It means that our people have new reason to hope.
Her legacy continues through the annual Lowitja O'Donoghue Orations and Lowitja Institute, worthy tributes for a remarkable woman.
Dr O'Donoghue is not only being remembered for her pioneering work in both the health systems and the public service, but also for her grace and kindness. Many political figures have paid tribute to the Indigenous leader, while her family have expressed their pride of her significant achievements. Daniel Litchens reports.
A lasting legacy remembered and cherished by political leaders across the country.
So much of what we see in Aboriginal affairs policy today can be found in its genesis in the things that Lowitja O'Donoghue has done.
We are a nation that knows itself now better than at any time in the past. Is a lot to do with Lowitja O'Donoghue.
The impact of the passing of Indigenous leader Dr Lowitja O'Donoghue can best be described by her own family. We adored and admired her when we were young and have grown up full of never-ending pride as she became one of the most respected and influential Aboriginal leaders this country has ever known. A legacy carried on by an institute and a foundation named in her honour, working towards advancements in Indigenous health.
She told us to be a courageous organisation that was very committed to social justice and equity for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples, and to match those words to action.
But Dr O'Donoghue is not only remembered in words, but in hearts. Former Senator and Elder Pat Dodson saying, hers was a strong voice, and her intelligent navigation for First Nations people's rightful place in a resistant society resulted in many of the privileges we enjoy today. She will be forever remembered in our hearts. While Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that Dr O'Donoghue walked tall, and her example and inspiration made us all walk taller. During her long and remarkable life, she was awarded an Order of Australia, 7 honorary doctorates, a NAIDOC Lifetime Achievement Award, and even a papal honour from Pope John Paul II. A remarkable life to be honoured as such by the state government.
I have had a lot of discussions in recent times with Lowitja's family. There will be an offer of a state funeral.
An appropriate celebration of the life of a First Nations pioneer. Daniel Litchens, ABC News.
A man will face court on Monday, charged with 2 counts of murder after the bodies of a mother and son were found at a home in Adelaide's northwest. Officers were called to a Rosetta Street home in Rosewater just after 1 p.m. on Saturday. Police say the victims, a 76-year-old woman and 55-year-old man, sustained significant injuries. A 43-year-old man of no fixed address was arrested at the scene.
It is a rather confronting crime. We've seen a couple of those recently and they shock us. But we should have confidence, and as I do, that SAPOL will do a thorough investigation.
We need to get a resilient, working police force, a police force that has the resources and the support from government to do their job well.
Anthony Albanese says he's an honest person as he defends a broken promise and sells his tax cut changes to the public. Federal Parliament returns this week with the tax cuts top of the agenda. The Greens want more changes and some in the coalition want no change at all. But the government is confident voters are on side. Here's political reporter Tom Lowry.
Questions of character.
I'm asking whether your word is still your bond.
David, I'm an honest person.
As the Prime Minister sells a tax turnaround.
Low and middle income Australians are under pressure. What I can't do as Prime Minister of Australia is to wring my hands and say, if only there was something I could do about it.
Internal polling is telling Labor the public broadly likes its Stage 3 tax changes. The question is what voters make of a broken promise.
Circumstances have changed, and what we've done is respond to the changed economic circumstances.
Labor still hasn't fixed the unfairness in the Stage 3 tax cuts.
But first, the government has to convince the Greens or the coalition.
We'll be fighting for more for low and middle income earners when this comes to Parliament.
The bill will land in Parliament on Wednesday, but has been made public today, ahead of party room meetings tomorrow and Tuesday. Some in coalition ranks want to take a stand.
We should stick with what Australians have been promised, what the Labor Party voted for, what the Liberal Party voted for, what the Australian people voted for, which were the Stage 3 tax cuts.
Others sounding more open-minded.
We'll be pragmatic, we'll discuss the details of that, but we want to put as much back in people's pockets as we can.
Peter Dutton has already dropped hints the coalition won't look to block this legislation. It may opt to vote these changes through and take its own tweaks to the next election. The government is confident it's starting the parliamentary year on the right note, and it hopes that might carry through to a looming by-election. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
In a second day of major attacks in the Middle East, the US and Britain have launched dozens of strikes on Iran-linked targets in Yemen. The Pentagon hit Houthi rebel groups, saying weapons facilities and missile systems that have been used to attack ships in the Red Sea were destroyed. The strikes had the support of Australia alongside other countries like Bahrain, Canada and New Zealand. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese joined Britain in saying the attacks are not an escalation, but the Houthis have promised to retaliate.
British and US forces strike 36 Houthi targets in Yemen. It's the second day of US-led operations retaliating against a deadly attack by Iran-backed militias on American troops last week. British warplanes leaving from Cyprus, US aircraft carriers deployed to the region, flying high-stakes missions and firing cruise missiles.
For both stations.
And bomber units from Texas, whose commander says they can engage in any operation anywhere on the globe. The strikes have the support of several countries, including Australia, which officials said included intelligence and assistance with logistics.
We want to see the area settle down. We're working with our allies to play a role there.
These are the Houthi fighters they're trying to stop. The Allied strikes hit deeply buried weapons storage facilities, as well as missile and air defence systems the Iran-backed militia are using against international ships in the Red Sea. Before the strikes, the militants released this video of training, attacking cars and practicing kidnapping of people pretending to be foreign soldiers.
Iran's proxies have played with fire for months and years, and it's now burning them.
The US insists the latest attacks are part of an existing operation to degrade the capabilities of the Houthis. But as hostilities intensify, it's clear what's actually happening here in the Middle East. This is an escalating war between the US and the tentacles of Iran. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
For the people of Yemen, conflict is not new. Nearly a decade of civil war has already devastated much of the nation, plunging it into what the UN calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Yemenis now fear for another war that looms.
For most of his life, Fuad El-Jadi has walked to class each morning, knowing he may not return home.
My school was shelled, and I had to stop going for a while. As a child, I was afraid our house would be hit. I was constantly in fear.
After nearly a decade of civil war in Yemen, fighting between Houthi rebels and government forces was put on hold in 2022 in a UN-brokered truce. That truce has held longer than expected, allowing 13-year-old Fuad to focus on what matters.
We have big dreams. We want to become doctors and engineers.
Now his country faces another war against a powerful enemy, threatening to undo the fragile peace. American airstrikes on Houthi rebel targets in Yemen have drawn Washington and some Western allies, including Australia, into an expanding conflict in the Middle East. Residents now worry a dark new chapter is beginning. Locals are stockpiling fuel in anticipation of a war with the West, while business owners are bracing for further economic decline.
The news is bad and a war is looming. We worry we'll be forced to shut the factory.
In Shima Ibrahim's chocolate shop, years of conflict forced her to let go of staff, while black market supplies have become unaffordable.
We faced the last war bravely, then we're ready for a tough new war.
For the generation that's known nothing but, surviving is the only option.
Even if there was another war on Yemen, we will not surrender. I will carry on.
Tom Joyner, ABC News.
The federal government is finally set to introduce rules requiring car companies to supply more fuel-efficient new vehicles to Australia. Australia has been an outlier on introducing standards, lagging well behind countries including China, the US and New Zealand.
These shiny new electric cars are getting ready to hit the streets, and the government wants more Australians to get behind the wheel.
85% of cars sold around the world are sold under fuel efficiency standards, and it's way beyond time that Australia catches up.
New rules would require car companies to supply more fuel-efficient vehicles, with targets set on the average emissions per kilometre for new cars sold, with fines for non-compliance. The government says it would lead to savings of up to $1,000 every year in fuel costs.
Australians are paying more at the bowser than they should compared to people in other countries because they're using more petrol and diesel.
Car companies have been very clear to us that the latest and best vehicles that they create are often not brought to Australia at all or are brought here years later, specifically because we haven't had these standards in place.
The US has had emissions standards since the 1970s, but change in Australia has been a long time coming.
We are going to stand by our tradies and we are going to save their utes.
The opposition says fuel efficiency standards could make some vehicles unaffordable.
We are going to hear all sorts of nonsense from the opposition, from a range of other stakeholders about this. We're going to hear that, you know, utes are banned. That is not true.
The peak body for car manufacturers says current technology is limited.
And my greatest concern without doing the analysis is around utes, especially 4x4 utes and large SUVs.
The Climate Council says Australia has a long way to go to catch up with the rest of the world.
It would be great to have had it done, 20 years ago, but here we are and it's good to have it done now.
But even with legislation going through Parliament this year, the changes would not come into effect until 2025. Sasha Payne, ABC News.
It's been described as a cowardly and violent crime. A 70-year-old woman was fatally stabbed in an Ipswich shopping centre west of Brisbane in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter. Queensland Police have launched a manhunt and released CCTV of 4 men who stole her car. Jay Bowman reports.
A community reeling in shock. 70-year-old Vilene White had just finished shopping at this centre in Redbank Plains when she was stabbed in the chest in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter.
But it's abhorrent, it's violent, and it is a cowardly crime like I have not seen in my time as a detective.
A local doctor heard the young girl scream and rushed to the older woman's help.
I followed her and I saw the lady in a pool of blood. She wasn't responsive, so I called 000.
Despite attempts at CPR, she died at the scene. It's rocked the community.
I've got the twins here and my other son. I'm feeling like it could easily happen to my kids as well as me and my family.
The Ipswich mayor says it's the most violent thing she's seen in her time in office.
We really do need this particular person to be identified. They need to be caught and they need to be locked up for the rest of their lives.
Mrs. White's car was stolen and ditched half an hour later. Police found it in nearby Springfield Lakes this morning. CCTV shows 4 males leaving the car.
It doesn't matter where they are, we will locate these offenders or offender and we will hold them accountable.
Detectives believe only one of the men committed the attack. Police say senior officers were taken aback by the level of violence in the attack. They're reviewing the footage and interviewing witnesses, hoping to track down the offender.
It is an abhorrent crime, a terribly violent crime.
How do we get to the point in Queensland where a visit to the shops can cost you your life?
Officers are urging anybody who witnessed the incident or who may have seen the car last night to contact them. Jay Bowman, ABC News, Ipswich.
Northern Ireland has elected a nationalist leader for the first time in its 103-year history. Michelle O'Neill is from Sinn Féin, a party which advocates for a united Ireland and was once a political arm of the Irish Republican Army during the Troubles conflict. The 47-year-old pledged to represent both nationalists and unionists equally and says it's an historic day.
It does represent a new dawn. For the very first time, a nationalist takes up the position of First Minister. That such a day would ever come was unimaginable to my parents' and grandparents' generation.
An Aboriginal family claims a major insurer slugged their pensioner father with excessive premiums for his asbestos cottage in outback Western Australia. The last annual bill 88-year-old Leonard O'Meara paid before he died was $10,000, despite the property being worth very little. There are calls for an investigation into whether he was overcharged as rising insurance costs push more Australians into financial stress. National Consumer Affairs reporter Michael Atkin has this special report, which uses Mr. O'Meara's name and image with the permission of his family.
Leonard O'Meara's home in Derby in WA's Kimberley region is modest but full of heart and history.
Mum and Dad were so proud. They were probably the first Aboriginal people in town to buy their own house. Look at this photo here of Mum and Dad in the wedding.
Oh, that's beautiful, eh? In 2009, the pensioner was sold a home insurance policy when he visited the local branch of ANZ Bank. The policy was underwritten by QBE and initially an ANZ subsidiary.
Insurance was just a natural part of home ownership, and he paid his premiums every year.
Dad's bedroom,
His daughters discovered just how much when the 88-year-old asked for help. His premium had jumped to $9,500, more than double the average for northwestern Australia.
All has to be redone. I actually thought it was a mistake. And when I saw that, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it.
Over more than a decade, the Jaru man diligently paid $54,000. Since 2016, the policy's cost almost quadrupled.
So this veranda here has all popped up.
How are you, Maureen?
Financial counsellor Alan Gray is helping the family seek a refund and compensation.
Thank you.
Mr Gray has obtained an alternative quote with another insurer for $2,850 a year.
And you know, the funny thing is...
He questions if his client was charged excessive premiums, known as a loyalty tax, as a long-term customer who wasn't shopping around.
This would be the worst insurance rip-off I've ever encountered. I'm absolutely certain that Leonard paid a loyalty tax to QBE.
Mr Gray recorded this short video with Leonard O'Meara last September, shortly before his death. He claims the bank pressured him to take out the insurance.
They stated that I had to pay that insurance. Well, I didn't want to argue with it because the house was very important to me, so I paid it.
His family is demanding answers about why the insurance policy was so expensive when the house is worth so little. A recent valuation estimated it was worth no more than $175,000, mainly for the land.
How do they charge an aged pensioner this amount of premiums for a home that we don't even know the value of?
QBE denies it ripped off Mr O'Meara, saying his premiums reflected the risks and benefits of the policy, which was for full replacement, and that rebuilding would be more expensive to meet current standards. ANZ would not comment on Leonard's case, but insists it gives clear advice to customers about insurance products, taking into account their financial situations. Leonard's experience points to a concerning national trend. Rising premiums are pushing more households to go uninsured or into financial stress as they struggle to afford cover.
1 in 8 households in Australia face insurance premiums that is more than a month of their income. That's about 1.24 million households.
Actuary Sharanjit Padam says you can save as much as 50% by shopping around.
There is likely to be a better deal out there for you.
How much will that...
Alan Gray and the family are calling on corporate regulator ASIC to investigate. While the recent loss of Leonard O'Meara remains raw, his family is determined to pursue his alleged mistreatment.
I think they took advantage of my dad because of his age, his vulnerability, his loyalty. We feel so grieved and so hurt by what they've done to Dad that we're definitely going to continue this fight with them.
More than 600 people have taken part in this year's Marilyn Jetty swim at Adelaide's Brighton Beach to raise money for cancer prevention, research and support services. Now in its 11th year, the annual event has raised more than $1 million to date, attracting swimmers decked out as the iconic 1950s star from around the world. The fundraiser was founded by Sarah Tinney after her mother was diagnosed with uterine cancer in 2006 before passing away in 2007. She says the swim has broken fundraising records this year with more than $310,000 collected for the Cancer Council while bringing together people of all ages.
I decided that I would throw myself into fundraising and try to help people like my mom here in Australia because there's nothing else I could do, and it was the best therapy that you can possibly take on.
An excellent half-century from number 8 batter Sean Abbott has saved Australia from a low total in the second one-day international against the West Indies at the SCG. The host struggled on a slow wicket, falling to 6 for 142 in the 29th over before Abbott came to the crease. He and debutant Will Sutherland put on 57 for the 8th wicket, with Abbott eventually falling for 69 off 63 deliveries as Australia made 258 38 from its 50 overs. Gudakesh Moti was the pick of the bowlers, claiming 3 for 28 from his 10 overs. The Australian women's team will be looking to continue its winning form in one-day cricket when it meets South Africa again in Canberra on Wednesday. Megan Shute took 1 for 1 of 5 overs in her 200th international as Australia thrashed the tourists in the first ODI game in Adelaide. An unbeaten 52 from Beth Mooney ensured that the home team reached the victory target of 106 with more than 30 overs to spare.
You know, I've probably got my game in pretty good order at the moment, but you know, as we know, the game can change pretty quickly as well, so I never want to get too ahead of myself, but I'm always really happy contributing to the success of this Australian team.
Adelaide coach Carl Viet is expected to swing the selection axe after his team's 4-0 thrashing by the Central Coast in the A-League men's. The match was over before half-time after the Mariners scored 3 times in just 16 minutes. That included 2 from Angel Torres, with the Reds defenders granting the Colombian too much space. The rout was complete late in the game when the home side gave away a penalty. The drubbing raising plenty of questions, with Viet pointing the finger at several underperforming players.
You've got to come in and do the work, and we've got some young players that think that because they're playing here and doing okay every now and then, that it's going to be good enough for them to move overseas, but it's not.
We're 12, 13 games into the season. It's just, for me, it's an effort, it's a concentration and that desire to actually want to win and want to get back and help your teammate out.
Tasmania looks to have ended the Adelaide 36ers NBL final hopes with a 23-point victory. The Jack Jumpers were in control from the opening quarter, with former 36er Jack McVeigh leading the way. Informed guard Trey Kell was doing his best to keep Adelaide in the match with a hot hand from the three-point line. But Tasmania had all the answers, forcing errors and proving unstoppable in offence. The Jack Jumpers are now in 3rd place, while the 36er are at odds to make the playoffs despite a late season run. The fight to claim the Australian Baseball League's Claxton Shield has come down to a deciding game 3 between Adelaide and Perth tonight. The Heat was on track to wrap up in the series game early in 2 last night, matching the home side run for run. However, Adelaide pulled away late with Nick Ward run taking the score to 6-3. Pitcher Todd Van Steensel closed out Perth's innings, committing both teams to a final playoff in Adelaide tonight. On to the weather details now, but first tonight's photo taken at Port Noarlunga and sent to us by Michael O'Shea. It was dry and hot across Adelaide in the city. The mercury reached 39.6 degrees after an overnight low of 18.5. Further afield, there was rain and storms in the far northeast today, and a southerly change brought some relief to coastal areas. Top temperatures ranged from 22 at Cape Willoughby to 45 at Tarcoola. Cloud over the eastern interior in a low and troughs will continue to generate rain, showers and storms over New South Wales, Victoria, eastern areas of our state and eastern Tasmania. Those systems will also draw heat to the east. A high pressure system west of Perth extends a ridge over waters to our south. That'll maintain a fresh south to southeasterly flow over our state, bringing us mostly fine and warm conditions over the week. Interstate showers and 33 for Sydney tomorrow, rain with 26 for Canberra, sunny and 28 for Perth, a scorcher in Alice Springs with 43. Closer to home, those showers in the far northeast in remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily will continue tomorrow, bringing heavy falls there, and conditions will be windy across much of the north, 37 for Lee Creek. Milder and mostly sunny in the south, 22 for Port Lincoln, 24 for Coonawarra. A total fire ban with extreme fire danger continues until midnight tonight for these areas. There's a severe weather warning for heavy rain and damaging winds for the northeast pastoral district, and a strong wind warning tomorrow for Adelaide Metro Waters, Spencer Gulf and Gulf St Vincent. Fine and sunny for Adelaide tomorrow, 25 for the city, down to 17 overnight. On the waters, southerly winds to 30 knots north of Grange late afternoon, seas increasing to 2 metres. The sun will rise at around 20 to 7 and set about 20 past 8. Staying fine for the rest of the week ahead, 26 for Wednesday, 28 on Thursday, up to 31 degrees for this time next week. That's the latest from the South Australian News team. Thanks for your company. Have a great night.